Hey everyone. I'm Kate Chapman. I'm head of sustainability at London Marathon Events. And as the little video just showed there, we are more than just the London Marathon. We've got a portfolio of around 15 events per year. It changes year on year, but yeah, about 15 events spanning running, swimming, cycling, and then also last year we introduced basketball into the portfolio as well. I look after environmental sustainability. We have a huge team looking at our community engagement and social impact. But from an environmental sustainability perspective, participant travel to our events is the biggest driver of our carbon emissions. So, hence working with you, Smart Thing.
Amazing. And would you like to introduce yourself, Steve?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Steve Gilholme, Head of Events at Transport for Greater Manchester. The simplest way to explain who we are is we're like TfL, but smaller, and in the north. So we're commonly more known now as the B Network. So anybody who's familiar with Manchester, about 3 years ago, we embarked on re-regulating the bus services. We was the first city in the UK to do that, and we became the B Network. So now we have lots of yellow buses, yellow spikes, and yellow trams. Um, as the slide says there, we are a local government authority still. We deliver the transport policies set by the city region mayor and GMCA, so very similar model to what you see in London. We own the bus and networking, the bus and Metrolink, infrastructure. We own all the traffic signals across Greater Manchester, and we've got the second largest cycle hire scheme. Again, just second to London. We have a travel safe scheme, which is officers on our network, making sure everyone can travel around the network safely. We have a multimodal control centre to monitor all this day and night, 24/7. And we see about 42 million journeys across Greater Manchester every week. We haven't stopped with our ambitions. So next we're looking at rail. So now we want lots of yellow trains in Manchester, which is extremely difficult given the government's agenda for national rail. But we're hopeful to have, and by the end of this year, we're looking to roll out an integrated ticketing scheme, which will enable people to travel seamlessly across bus, tram, and train.
Amazing. So let's jump into the main discussion of today's panel. As a reminder, the title is Catalysing Sustainable Travel Behaviour Through Major Events. So when travel to and from major events goes wrong, it makes headlines. And we saw this in 2024 with Germany and Deutsche Bahn, and they experienced really negative press during the Euros. However, when trains and event travel go smoothly, it's a non-talking point. Kate, could you tell us a little bit about about the running events London Marathon puts on and how working with local and transport authorities tends to work for London Marathon events?
Yeah, so I can probably split that into two sections. There's the events that we run in London, and then we've started in the last few years to deliver events outside of London, notably Brighton Marathon and the Bath Half Marathon, as well as we've got a subsidiary company that delivers events in Scotland as well. I think we'd got very used in London to the fact that participant travel just wasn't so much of an issue. I think if you're familiar with the travel network in London, when when it's working well, it's brilliant. And we've had a partnership with TfL for many years, particularly on Marathon Day, whereby participants and volunteers all get free transport on the TfL network, which is amazing, and just make sure. I mean, we never offer any parking at any of our events in London. The idea of anybody thinking that they might drive to an event, I mean, hopefully we put them off by the fact that we close most of the roads. But being able to offer that free transport on the public transport network has been fantastic. On occasion, when that doesn't work, it does cause a huge headache. So we did have an issue. I think it was last year, was it? Yeah, last year, with the big half marathon, which is in September, and there was a tube strike around that time. And that meant that actually having a something like Smart Thing where our participants were able to go in and find out exactly which stations were closed, which trains were running, how they could alternatively get to the start, meant that it took some of the stress away from that. And then if we look at our events outside of London, Brighton and Bath, a lot of people have to drive to those events, particularly Bath, because the public transport just doesn't get in early enough on a Sunday morning to allow them to get public transport there. So again, this is where having the kind of travel planning tool helps people to understand what the impact is of their journey, what the options are for them to get there. And it also takes account of all of the roads that we close, because whenever we operate an event, we're shutting a lot of the roads in that city, which makes moving around by car very difficult.
Amazing. And Steve, I know you joked about London and the difference between Manchester and London, but you are drawing some of the biggest events away from London next week. You've got the Brit Awards coming. You've already been confirmed as the host for 2 of the stages of the Tour de France Femme and the Grand Depart, and some of the UK and Ireland Euros will also be in Manchester. So it'd be great to get an understanding of how you're positioning Manchester as a global stage and what you're doing to improve event travel so that can happen.
Yeah, so speaking very biased, obviously, for Manchester, I think the real benefit Manchester has over London is we're very small in comparison to London. So a large event like the Brits, we're able to really embrace that quite easily. As you say, we've got the Brits this weekend where we've worked with the Brits, we've worked with Court Live, and we can offer free inclusive transport. Now, it's very difficult as a local transport authority to do an offer such as that. So it's really key that we work with the venues, work with the event organisers, so we can do initiatives that really promote public transport. Public transport for us, again, very similar to what Kate was saying about outside of London. We do have limitations. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the frequency that London offers. So we have to look at what else can we do. What else can we do to incentivize people to come to Manchester and see Manchester as an event venue? I think one of the real things that we've got in Manchester, because we've got that smallness in comparison to London, we have almost a community feel. So we can all embrace it together and we all work together to welcome people. Now, I've never been to the Brits in London, but I've been assured that the Brits can just happen and nobody would know. In Manchester, you can't move at this moment in time to know when the Brits is coming. And that's what we do through wayfinding. So when we know that there's going to be lots of people coming to Manchester and they're not familiar with Manchester. So there's wayfinding, there's the trams, we've got DJs on trams, we've got tram wraps. Again, you can't fail to know us that the Brits is taking place. And that's really important for us to make sure that the people bringing events to Manchester feel welcome.
And I was just going to jump on that. If none of you have been to Manchester during one of these major events, you can't quite imagine how well you've done the marketing. So for the Oasis gigs, for example, all of the trams said she's electric on all of them. And I know it's super simple and really cheesy, but it's very effective. And similarly, doing similar things with the Brits and that marketing is visible. Like you said, you know that the Brits are coming to Manchester. I'm from London and often I'm surprised when I get on the tube and I'm like, which event are they going to? I really cannot tell, because it's so big and we don't shout about it in the same way. And you mentioned the inclusive travel tickets with Co-op Live. Could you tell us a little bit about that and the other initiatives that you're doing to encourage people moving away from their default routes?
Yeah, so Co-op Live Arena, when that opened, which I think is nearly 2 years ago, we worked with the Co-op Live Arena to have inclusive travel included on the event ticket during that opening phase. So I think it was for 49 for initially 49 events. We had inclusive travel, meaning everybody could travel on Metrolink network to and from the venue, but more importantly, from their home. So that's why we was really keen because again, what we see Manchester again is a very small city centre. Court Live, where it is geographically, it's right next to the Etihad Stadium. So we was all a bit, we could forecast that there would be days where the network would be overwhelmed. So I was really keen in terms of getting people, trying to give them gentle nudges into doing the right thing in terms of sustainable travel. The reason we wanted the entire network, because we were saying to people, you don't have to travel to the city centre to catch the tram. You can use one of the many parking rides that we have around Greater Manchester as well. It was successful, so we've seen an increase of about 20% in terms of journeys on Metrolink. That's in comparison to what we see for Court Live now. We've removed that inclusive travel. However, we do continue to work with the likes of Co-op Travel. So for the MTV Awards last year, the Brits, the Mobiles that's coming up, we'll offer that inclusive travel for the pure reason that we want people to think about sustainability and how they travel to the venue, particularly for that last kilometre.
Yeah, and it's about establishing those habits beyond events. Like if you see a venue is accessible in terms of how you can get there, when the ticket is free and it doesn't cost you to make that decision, then maybe you'll go, I could jump on the tram next time I need to go to Co-op Live, even though I have to pay for it. I know it's actually a really easy journey, so it's worthwhile doing. And Kate, it'd be great to hear about the initiatives that you've put in place to encourage people to move away from that default travel. I know we talked about Bath Half previously, but if you have any initiatives in particular that you wanted to flag to get people traveling sustainably.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is about how you communicate to people. So we're very clear that, yeah, car travel will be difficult. It's giving people the information about how else they can get to the event. Um, so yeah, like I say, for the London events, it's much easier because a lot of people we know they might drive their end if they're coming from out of the city. They might drive to a point and then switch on to public transport. And again, that's where your tool helps a lot because it helps to really make those options obvious to people that, yeah, you might need to drive to get to your local station or to get to a bus, but just think how much easier it's going to be coming into London and without having to think about where are you going to park or leave a car. Um, yeah, well, obviously we've got the tie up with Transport for London in terms of the marathon with the free travel. And then for Bath and Brighton, we've got park and rides outside the city that we've put in place with shuttle buses again to kind of keep people if they do need to drive, keep them away from the city centres and then incentivizing people by charging a price per car. You do charge for the park and ride and the shuttle, but they're being incentivized to have as many people in the car as possible.
Amazing. And it's not fully on London Marathon events as the event delivery um team, but it's also not fully on the local authority to deliver those services where an event is taking place. So I know that you have a relationship with the local authority like Bath. I can't remember the name of it.
Bath and North East Somerset Council.
That's the one. And you're working this year specifically to put on a park and ride separate from the standard one, and that's partly because of events clashing and wanting to make sure that you're working to make it a better experience for the race participants as well as those that are just going to Bath.
Yeah, so last year we delivered the Bath Half Marathon for the first time last year as London Marathon events. We'd bought the event. And we managed to sort of break the city park and ride. We did such a good job of encouraging people to use the park and rides, and they were the ones that are operated by the city council, and they got overwhelmed, and yeah, there were lots of people who were late to the start, and then it gets really stressful for people because they think they've missed the start of the event, and some of them had missed the start of the event, to be fair, but we managed to get everybody going. And this year, the city council said to us, it's Mother's Day and there's going to be an awful lot of people coming to Bath that just want to get into the city. So please, could you not use our park and ride? So we've found our own space on the Bath race course and set up a shuttle service from there. So yeah, there is a real fine balance in terms of understanding what else might be going on, even if we're taking over a city and thinking about how what we do affect everybody else who might be trying to access that space and who also might be trying to travel more sustainably.
Yeah, and I don't think it has to be seen as a negative thing. You made people aware of services and you got them using it, and now you have a collaborative relationship with the local authority. And part of the problem is you just don't know where the park and rides are, where those services take place, how you can combine an event specific service with maybe a train ride or a national coach. So it's that awareness and then working so it is a good experience for everyone. And I'd like to pass that over to you, Steve, and how you see accountability and who owns the transport piece, especially around event.
So it's a really difficult question, and I think it's quite emotive, really, in terms of what people believe. So I think it depends on what side of the fence. So from Kate's position, I think she'd probably think that it should be down to the local authority. And from my position as local authority, I would say it's down to the event organizer. But I think the actual answer lays somewhere in between. The local authority controls the capacity, whilst the event brings the demand. And I think it's about that collaboration working together to say, right, what are we going to do? What do we need to do? And obviously, just noted the slide that's gone on with Oasis. And I think that for us is a real demonstration of how we achieve that collaboration together. So in Manchester, we have a real issue in terms of car dependency, where a number of the events, about 70 to 90% in terms of people driving, which is obviously something that we're really trying to drive down. For Oasis, we knew that there was I think it was around about 70% of people with a ticket didn't come from the Greater Manchester region. So we knew that they were probably more likely driving. And what we had to do there to try to change that mindset, I think it was working with the likes of U-SmartThing in terms of the bespoke journey planner, your journey planner being embedded on the event organizer's website as opposed to TFGM. Because again, who's going to go to the local authority website to know about event transport? It was those email drops where they embedded that journey planner. That really helped in terms of people understanding how they could travel sustainably. The bespokeness of the journey planner where we removed driving as an option as well really helped. So we're only giving people options for sustainable travel, cycling, walking. And what we've seen with Oasis, we've seen that 60% of people traveling to the event travel sustainably, either walking, cycling, Metrolink or bus, which for us is a massive success. And it's one that we're building on now for future large scale events.
Yeah, and I just changed the screen so you could see a few stats about the work that we're doing with London Marathon events and Transport for Greater Manchester. And we deploy the travel assistant for the local authority, but also specifically for the key venues and events like the Etihad Stadium, which is Manchester City Football Club's home ground. Also one-off events. So we're going to be doing the Manchester Marathon, once a year events like Manchester Marathon, and then for London Marathon events, we've got the Bath half and the big half up there. And the number that you were looking at, Steve, is the public transport use, and we got that to 57%. And why it's really important for you guys to be deploying the travel assistance, get people on public transport. But it's really important to include the likes of Kate in that conversation because you've got access to people who are going to those events. And we got the engagement with Oasis at 6%, Bath half 34%, and Big Half at 77%. And the chronology of the two London Marathon events is we first did the Bath half. We took away learnings around communications and how you really get people using it, and we got it so high for the Big Half. So yeah, it'd be great to hear about that communications piece, Kate, and then we'll come back to ownership.
Yeah, so Bath is the first of our events in the calendar in March, and then the big half comes, which is a London event, comes at the beginning of September. So as Alex said, we rolled this out across all of our events last year, having trialed it in 2024 and one of our autumn events. Um, and I think one of the things we learned is that you need to kind of get the message out as early as you can to people. So we can see through the dashboard on the tool that actually most people, if we send them a message, a communication, an email saying start planning your travel, and we send them a link to the personalized travel planner, we see a big spike in the number of people that open them and kind of start thinking about how they're going to plan. But we know that sort of left to their own devices, most people plan their travel literally the day before. Because I think a lot of people think, well, I know maybe I live in London. I know how I'm getting to Greenwich Park, or sorry, the big half actually starts on Tower Bridge, but people think, I know how I'm going to get there. So there's a real piece about encouraging people to go and have a look at this travel plan and saying, yes, but is there a better way that you could get there? Is there a different way? Is there a more efficient way, a quicker way, a lower carbon way you could get there? So it's these nudge things to say to people, please go and have a look at the tool. Also, we're closing a load of the road. So if you were thinking about driving or, potentially even cycling there, then make sure you go and check the tool. The big half, one of the reasons I think why that figure was so high is because there were these tube strikes. And so suddenly it came into its own. So people that might have thought, I'll just look at Google or I'll just look at City Mapper, then we really got the message out that those apps are not necessarily going to help you because they haven't got all of the detail about where the route is and where you need to be. So we can really customize it and direct people very much to where a start line is going to be or an assembly area is going to be that they just wouldn't get from looking at one of those other tools, which also don't have our road closures in them. So yeah, it was a combination of timing and making people aware earlier, encouraging them to plan even if they think they know where they're going. And then yeah, you chuck in a tube strike and suddenly that really, makes people start using it.
And I have another question written down about managing those disruptions. Like you can spend multiple years, many months planning for an event, and then the tube strike gets announced a week beforehand, and there's rail replacement activity on the rail lines, and you can't do anything about it. So it's really important about establishing a single source of truth. So that's probably one of the reasons why we got that engagement so high for the big half. But it's also people, like you said, need to be nudged, and it's not meant to be complicated. Like if you tell them to do it and it's one click, then you're more likely to do it than otherwise. So it'd be great to understand how you're managing those disruptions and establishing that single source of truth with in transport for Greater Manchester with the B network. Maybe talking a little bit about the likes of Piccadilly being shut down and curated journey information.
I think the key word for me, and I keep repeating this, is collaboration. We really can't do it on our own. I think there's obviously two types of disruption. I think there's obviously the plan disruption where it allows you to plan ahead. I think obviously with Manchester, we've just come out from Piccadilly blockade, which is effectively the main station in Manchester was closed down for 9 days. During that period, we had 3 events at Code Live. We had 2 football matches at the Etihad. We had the World Track Cycling at Velodrome. These are all venues that are in like a kilometre square. So that presented a real issue for us. There was 3 events on one day as well. So again, that intensifies that sort of issue. I think that collaboration comes from understanding, working with Network Rail, understanding what it means in terms of the impact, working then with local operators in terms of that mitigation. What does rail replacement look like? Will it give us the capacity, not just for the background users, but those going to the events? Um, then understanding where there's any gaps as well, looking at that data, looking how we can enhance further the rail replacement as we had football and co-op on at the same time. We then, as a local authority, it's our responsibility. What could we do? So we give ticket acceptance on buses and trams, again, to sort of reduce the pressure on the rail replacement, and then give people more opportunity as well. I think in terms of Manchester City, what we're seeing for the Saturday fixture, we've seen an 80% increase in people trying to go on public transport and bespoke shuttles. So again, that message really worked in terms of crafting the message and pushing the message out. As I said before, TFGM, we nobody really comes to us for that messaging. So it's working with Manchester City Football Club, working with Co-op, making sure that they're pushing out that message to everybody. And again, I'm a big fan of the bespoke journey planners.
I'm glad.
Yeah, it enables us to get that message across because I think certainly for unplanned disruption, the biggest issue you face is the cancellation of journeys. They're not often cancelled in journey planners. So they appear and then that's giving people false information in terms of what their options are. Whereas with the bespoke, you can get the messages out and you can tell people exactly what they need to do.
Amazing. And I'd really like to talk a bit more about Man City. And I know we worked with you on the Man City match day bus. So it'd be great to understand why this came about and how you actually made it a success from a pilot to rolled out and more on the getting people to think about public transport and
I think the reason we did it again is working with Manchester City. We like most cities in the UK now. There's a net zero target, and I think we just need to understand what's really going to drive where we're going to get our biggest bang for our buck in terms of reducing carbon emissions. In Manchester, we've got the 2 big football clubs, so we know week in week out we've got upwards of 70,000 people going to watch football. So we started working with Manchester City and just said, what can we do to increase that or encourage more sustainable travel? The issue we have at the Etihad is it's got one Metrolink line, so there's only one tram line, which has got a 38-mile capacity. So we couldn't really do anything more with that. So we started exploring what could we do with buses. Now, buses, obviously, I'm a busman, so I will say this. You've got greater opportunity with buses, more flexible. So we created a match day bus network, which goes to about 85 locations across Greater Manchester. What we did is we looked at the data for where supporters live, where there was a lot of supporter density, but where there was an ineffective public transport connection as well. So you can live as, I think there was areas where only about 4 or 5 miles away from the Etihad Stadium where it would take you up to 2 hours to travel by public transport. So they're the areas that we really targeted. We've just done 2 years of the match day bus concept. And again, we've seen growth. I think it's something like 262% in terms of the growth of people using those services. People pay more to travel on buses what they do to public transport, but because we micromanage that system and we push out the information and again using journey planners where these match day buses appear, people have got confidence that it's the right product for her. And I think that's what it demonstrates. If you get that product right, people believe in it and they'll use it.
and for both Kate and Steve, some people are sticking with their default routes. Like you're putting on these amazing services, and where do you think that's happening? Like, why are people still driving to Man City when there are 2 major events happening on the Etihad campus and there's limited parking? What can we do about it?
Yeah, I think just on the match day bus, we have seen a 3% fall in card pending sale. I know it doesn't sound a great deal, but it's a start. And I think for me, I think again, it's the football fans are probably the hardest crowd to change because they'll do what they've always done. They've always gone to the Etihad the same way for 25 years, and it's how you get them to do something different. Um, and it is really difficult. And I think, as Kate said before, people don't often do their planning of their journey till the day before. And again, I think it's the challenge back to the likes of yourself and Chris as our IT sort of provider and support. How can we be more engaged? What can we do to amplify that message much earlier to get people to do things different? And again, I use that word, it's that collaboration together to see what the
And for you, Kate, are there any groups that you feel are not budging, and there's still opportunity to make them think about travel more actively, and potentially its comms, potentially its initiatives?
I think we still need to do a bit more digging into who it is who are the hard ones to budge. I think there's a feature in You Smart Thing in the journey plans that you do for us. I think you do it for everybody, but to cater for our kind of crowd, it tells you how many calories you're burning because each journey option. So if you're walking, if you're cycling, if you're scooting, if you're on the bus, on the train, driving or whatever, and it's like behavioral information like that is always helpful. But obviously, you've got to bear in mind that if somebody's coming to run a marathon, maybe they actually really don't care how many calories they're going to burn on the way there and the way back because they're actually more about conserving energy. But I think certainly for the events outside of London, we need to focus on those people who really could travel actively, or could use the public transport that's available to them. I think there's a perception that you don't want to be hanging around, particularly at the end. You want to make sure you're going to get there on time. This is the issue with an event. I mean, it's the same will be for a football match or a gig. You don't want to miss the start, but also, can you get away easily at the end? Nobody wants to be hanging around when they're tired and cold. So I think yeah, making sure that there is a reliable, well, we can't make sure there's a reliable service. That's the thing. That's where we've got to work with the transport providers and kind of think about what else we can offer. But that's where things like shuttle services come in, or like you were saying, the match day bus. And I know, yeah, Chris is trying to talk to me about kind of putting on green coaches and that kind of thing. So yeah, we're not there yet, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like tapping into the data allows you to think about the audiences that you haven't been able to influence yet, or who your audience even is. Like, capturing travel data typically has been really challenging because a lot of the time you're capturing it after an event, and so you have to incentivize people to fill out a survey. But if they're using the technology to figure out the journey options in advance, then you can actually get that travel intent and real-time travel information um credibly, and act on it, so that you can see that a third of your audience is going to take the park and ride, for example, with the bath off, and put on enough services in line with that demand. So we're coming up to the last 5 or so minutes, and it'd be great to answer any questions if anyone has any from the initiatives we've been talking about, the challenges around travel and event travel and modal change. If not, we can talk for a bit longer.
I couldn't resist. Sorry. Thanks, Alex. And I'm sorry I missed the intro to this talk. Got embroiled in a conversation. My question is for both Steve and Kate. And I'm wondering how what the conversations are like internally, and how you reconcile the objectives of delivering an amazing visitor or participant experience and delivering positive environmental impact. Which is more important? Not to you, but to your organizations, and how do you sort of wrestle with those conversations internally and get the buy-in that you need to do what you do?
Oh, thanks. That's a big question. Um, I think I could say very clearly that the focus for London Marathon events is on delivering an amazing participant experience. Our mission is about inspiring activity, and so everything comes back to that. So are we somehow inspiring activity, whether that's for the people who are actively taking part in the events that we organize, and we organize a lot of community-based events as well, but are we also inspiring beyond that, for everybody who sat there watching the marathon on the 26th of April on their TVs? There's a huge bounce we know from Couch to 5K that their biggest sign-up days are New Year's Day and the day after the London Marathon, for example. So inspiring activity is front and center. Having said that, we don't want to be inspiring activity at the expense of trashing the planet. So it is a very active conversation. We are acutely aware that participant travel is, like I said at the beginning, the biggest, forms by far the biggest part of our carbon emissions. Most of that is from the international participants to the London Marathon. I mean, it is, you know, 92% of our overall carbon footprint for the whole organization for every event we run comes from those participants who are flying to our events. So yeah, it dwarfs everything else, but it does get discussed very regularly, and anything that we can do to tackle that impact, we want to be doing.
So I think from local authority, I think anybody going to an event, there's often a cost versus time equation in their mind. And I think you obviously missed the intro, Chris, but I think at the start we were saying about rail becoming part of the B network. I think what that gives us is that integration of ticketing. So again, it makes seamless travel more accessible for people. And I think what we start to do then is we can make cheaper travel, because it's very expensive these days on trains. You all know this, Chris. It really is. And I think again, if we can make travel cheaper for people, that then starts putting big tick in that box for people. The challenge for us from public transport is how we can make it more efficient. So again, at the start, I was saying in Manchester, we're really lucky in terms of what we do, but in terms of that ownership of the bus infrastructure and the tram infrastructure, traffic signals. So we have actually something called Google Cities. And what that looks like, it looks at all our traffic signals right across Greater Manchester and tells us when they're being inefficient. So we take that learning from Google. I think there's only 3 cities in the world using this. We take that data and we look at what we can do in terms of those signals being more efficient. So again, to get traffic moving much quicker. So again, what we're trying to do is compete with the car but tell people it is cheaper, it's as fast. Come and use public transport, hopefully.
Amazing. There's one more. I will run to the back.
Just following up on your point, Kate, about international travel being the largest contributing factor to carbon emissions. What are you doing to address that, or are you seeing that as an unsolvable problem? The same for my event; it's all international attendees, and it seems like an unsolvable problem.
Yeah, the main thing that we're doing is that we charge a carbon levy to all our international participants. So everyone coming from overseas for the London Marathon has to pay an additional £31. And that money is used to either directly fund things internally that are, within operationally that are going to cut the carbon footprint. So whether that's battery powered generators, or we've sort of funded e-bikes and that kind of thing. But actually, the vast majority of the money that's raised through that levy, I spend on carbon removal credits. It's not ideal. I mean, they are a more robust form of carbon offset credits, but they are directly removing carbon from the atmosphere. But it's not an equal. If we look at tons of carbon emitted by people flying in versus how many tons of carbon removal credits I can buy, there's an imbalance because those removal credits are really expensive. It is I was having a conversation earlier today about this and kind of looking, the number of internationals is going up. We're sort of structurally set ourselves up in this way that the marathon tourism is a thing. Yeah, but I think also looking just to the airlines to say, how are you going to decarbonize isn't necessarily the answer either. But unfortunately, I don't have an easy or a quick solution, because I'm being told that, we're not allowed to ban internationals.
There is still scope to maybe nudge a few of those international travelers to land-based transportation, or at least getting rid of short-haul flights. So if you're going to fly, maybe not take one from Paris from London. We're working with like UTMB to directly address that international flight element of travel and see modal shift. We're not going to get them to cycle, but we don't have to get them to take 3 internal European flights. But an amazing conversation about shifting behaviors specifically for events, and hopefully having a ripple effect and dripping down to other behaviors just in day to day. But it was loads of initiatives, challenges, and conversation about collaboration. So thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you guys for joining.